They lied to you. Everything WWE told you about the Vision was a deception. While you were celebrating Seth Rollins as the architect of the most dominant faction in modern wrestling, the real puppet master was lurking in the shadows, and what just happened will shatter everything you thought you knew about power in WWE. Brock Lesnar didn't just return, he annihilated Seth Rollins' entire empire in the most brutal hostile takeover wrestling has ever witnessed. The Vision? Dead. Seth's leadership? Obliterated. And if you think you know what's coming next, you're about to have your mind completely blown, because this goes deeper than anyone could have imagined. Right now, social media is exploding with fans who can't believe what they just witnessed. WWE locker room sources are saying superstars are genuinely terrified about what the Beast Incarnate has planned. This isn't storyline hyperbole, this is the most shocking power shift in WWE since the Roman Reigns bloodline saga began, and it's happening right now. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Vince McMahon himself reportedly called this the most important angle in a decade, and why backstage insiders are saying this could redefine WWE programming for the next 5 years. Let me paint you the picture of absolute carnage that went down, because what you saw on television was only the tip of the iceberg. The Vision, Seth Rollins' hand-picked collective of the most dangerous superstars on the roster, was supposed to be untouchable. The Visionary himself stood at the center, flanked by warriors he'd personally recruited, trained, and molded into his image. They dominated Raw, SmackDown, and even infiltrated NXT. They held championships, crushed legends, and made every single superstar backstage bend the knee. Seth Rollins wasn't just a leader, he was a prophet preaching his gospel of dominance. But here's what nobody saw coming, and this is where your blood should start boiling with anticipation. Brock Lesnar wasn't randomly inserted into this storyline, he's been the shadow player pulling strings since day one of the Vision's formation. Every victory Seth celebrated, every championship the Vision captured, every seemingly perfect execution of their master plan, Brock was watching, calculating, waiting for the exact moment when Seth's ego would reach its peak so he could tear it all down with maximum psychological devastation. Comment below, did you suspect Brock was behind the Vision from the beginning, or were you completely blindsided like Seth Rollins? The night it all came crashing down will go down in WWE history books as one of the most brutal displays of dominance ever captured on camera. Raw opened with Seth Rollins in the ring, the Vision members surrounding him like knights protecting their king. The crowd was actually chanting for Seth, love him or hate him. The Visionary had earned grudging respect for building something genuinely intimidating. He was mid-promo, talking about how the Vision had conquered every challenge WWE threw at them, when suddenly the lights cut out. Complete darkness. The kind of silence that makes your heart stop beating. When those lights came back on, Brock Lesnar was standing at the top of the ramp, Paul Heyman at his side with that sinister smile that tells you somebody's world is about to end. But it wasn't just Brock's presence that sent shockwaves through the arena, it was what he was holding. In his massive hands was a briefcase, but not just any briefcase. This was a contract, and written across it in bold letters that the cameras zoomed in on, the Vision founding document, signed by Brock Lesnar. Seth Rollins' face on the Titantron told the entire story. The color drained from his cheeks faster than a vampire at sunrise. His hands started trembling, that cocky smirk he'd worn for months completely vanished, replaced by genuine fear and confusion. The Vision members looked at each other, then at Seth, waiting for their leader to explain what was happening, but the Visionary was speechless. Paul Heyman grabbed the microphone and delivered one of the most devastating promos of his legendary career. He explained how Brock Lesnar had orchestrated the Vision's creation from the very beginning. Every member Seth thought he'd recruited, Brock had approved them. Every strategy Seth implemented, Brock had designed it. Every championship the Vision won, it was all part of Brock's master plan to consolidate power and then take it all when the time was right. Seth Rollins, Heyman said with venom dripping from every word, you were never the Visionary. You were the puppet. And my client, the Beast Incarnate, Brock Lesnar, was pulling your strings this entire time. You thought you were building an empire? You were building his empire. And now, the real architect is here to claim what's rightfully his. The crowd's reaction was nuclear. Half were booing the revelation, half were losing their minds at the storytelling genius, but everyone was on their feet. This wasn't just a surprise return, this was a complete recontextualization of months of storytelling. Suddenly every Vision victory, every Seth Rollins promo, every moment of dominance had new meaning. Fans in the arena were literally pulling up their phones to re-watch old segments with this new information. Quick trivia, how many championships had the Vision collectively held before this revelation? Drop your answer below, ***, but the psychological warfare was just the beginning. Brock started walking down that ramp, and with every step, Seth Rollins backed up. The supposed leader of the most dominant faction in WWE was retreating from a single man. The Vision members stood frozen, uncertain whether to attack Brock or wait for Seth's command. That moment of hesitation? That was the crack in the foundation that brought the entire empire crashing down. Then Brock did something that will be replayed in video packages for decades. He reached the ring, climbed over the top rope in that signature beast incarnate way, and stood face to face with Seth Rollins. The arena was silent. You could hear a pin drop. Brock extended his hand not for a handshake, but palm up, demanding something. Seth knew exactly what he wanted. The symbolic leadership of the Vision, represented by a custom-designed championship belt that Seth wore to every appearance, was being demanded back by its true owner. Seth looked at that hand, looked at his Vision members for support, and in that moment you could see the realization hit him like an F5. Nobody was coming to his rescue. The members of the Vision weren't his loyalists, they were Brock's soldiers all along. One by one, they dropped to one knee, facing Brock Lesnar, acknowledging their real leader. Seth Rollins stood alone in the center of the ring, surrounded by people he thought were his family, his army, his Vision, and they'd all betrayed him in the span of 60 seconds. The look on Seth's face was heartbreaking and infuriating at the same time. This wasn't just a heel turn or a surprise attack, this was complete psychological destruction. Everything Seth had built his identity around for the past year was revealed to be a lie. He wasn't the mastermind, he was the front man. He wasn't the leader, he was the placeholder. What happened next was the most vicious beatdown in recent WWE memory. Brock didn't just hit Seth with an F5, he demolished him. First F5 onto the mat. Seth struggled to his feet, and bam. Second F5. Seth's body was broken, but Brock wasn't done. He lifted Seth up for a third F5, this time sending him crashing onto the championship belt that Seth refused to hand over. The sound of Seth's body hitting that metal was sickening. Medical personnel tried to rush the ring, but the Vision members, now revealed as Brock's soldiers, blocked their path. Paul Heyman stood over Seth's broken body and delivered the final verbal nail in the coffin. The Vision isn't dead, Seth. The Vision was never yours to kill. It's just under new management, and that management is the most dominant, most dangerous, most devastating force in WWE history. Brock Lesnar. Comment your thoughts. Was this the most brutal power shift you've ever seen in WWE? Or does something else top it? But here's where this story gets even more insane, and this is why backstage sources are saying this is the biggest angle in years. The Vision wasn't just a faction, it was a business empire. Behind the scenes, the Vision had contracts, merchandise deals, sponsorships, and even their own production crew filming documentary-style content. All of it was being monetized, all of it was making money, and Seth Rollins thought he owned it all. The contract Brock revealed showed that he owned majority stake in every single Vision-related asset. Seth was essentially working for Brock this entire time and didn't even know it. The next episode of Raw opened with Brock Lesnar sitting in what used to be Seth's custom locker room, now completely redecorated with Beast incarnate imagery. The Vision members stood at attention like a military unit while Brock laid out the new world order. He announced that the Vision would continue, but it would operate as it was always intended to operate, as an instrument of Brock Lesnar's will. Championships would be won, opponents would be destroyed, and dominance would be absolute, but there would be no question about who was in charge. Then came the most shocking announcement. Brock declared that Seth Rollins would be given one opportunity to earn his way back into the Vision, not as a leader, but as a soldier. He would have to defeat 3 Vision members in consecutive matches on 3 consecutive Raws, and if he lost even once, he would be banished from WWE television indefinitely. The stipulation was designed to be impossible, a public humiliation to cement Seth's fall from grace. The WWE Universe was divided. Some fans rallied behind Seth, seeing him as the ultimate underdog fighting against impossible odds. Others celebrated Brock's dominance and the revelation that he'd been the mastermind all along. Social media exploded with debates, think pieces, and conspiracy theories about how far back this story really went. Were there hints in previous segments? Had certain promos contained hidden meanings? The wrestling community went into detective mode, analyzing every Vision moment with fresh eyes. Pop quiz: can you name all the original members of the Vision? Test your knowledge in the comments. Seth Rollins' response to this challenge was perfect character work. He came out on SmackDown showing up on the opposite brand from Raw, a place where the Vision theoretically had less control, and delivered a promo that reminded everyone why he's one of the best talkers in the business. He admitted he'd been deceived, acknowledged his ego had blinded him, but refused to accept that his legacy would end as Brock's puppet. He declared that he would expose Brock's manipulation, win the 3 matches, and then challenge Brock for complete control of the Vision. The first challenge match was scheduled Seth Rollins versus the most technically gifted member of the Vision in a submission match. The stipulation heavily favored Seth's opponent, and everyone assumed this was where Seth's journey would end. The match itself was an absolute masterpiece of storytelling. For 25 minutes, these two warriors destroyed each other. Seth absorbed punishment that would hospitalize normal humans, but every time he was locked in a submission, he fought with the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose. The finish was controversial and brilliant. Just as Seth locked in his own submission finisher, lights flickered, and Brock's presence was felt at ringside even though he never physically appeared. The distraction was enough for Seth's opponent to reverse the hold, but Seth, channeling every ounce of veteran instinct, countered with a small package roll-up for the 3 count. He won, but not decisively, not dominantly. It was survival, not victory. Backstage segments showed the Vision members confused and slightly nervous. This wasn't supposed to happen. Seth Rollins was supposed to fail immediately, but he'd found a way to win. Paul Heyman dismissed it as luck, but you could see the wheels turning. What if Seth actually pulled this off? What if the puppet cut his strings? The second challenge was even more brutal, a street fight against the Vision's most violent member. Weapons were legal, falls counted anywhere, and Brock himself would be at ringside as special observer. The match spilled throughout the arena, into the crowd, up the ramp, backstage. Seth was bloodied within 5 minutes, taking chair shots, kendo stick strikes, and going through tables. But something incredible was happening. The WWE Universe was rallying behind Seth in a way they hadn't in years. The underdog story was resonating deeply. Fans were chanting his name, giving him energy, willing him to survive. At one point, Seth was down in the parking lot, his opponent standing over him with a steel pipe, ready to deliver a match-ending blow, when the crowd's chant became so loud that Seth got a second wind. He dodged the pipe shot, superkicked his opponent into a production truck, climbed to the top of said truck, and hit a frog splash through a table below. Both men were destroyed. The referee counted 1, 2, 3. Seth wins again. But he literally couldn't stand. Medical staff had to help him to the back while the Vision members stood on the entrance ramp, their expressions shifting from cocky certainty to genuine concern. Your turn. If you were booking this storyline, what would the third and final match stipulation be? Give us your creative ideas below. ****. The third match was announced, and the stipulation made the entire wrestling world lose its collective mind. Seth Rollins versus all remaining Vision members in a gauntlet match. He would have to defeat them one by one without rest, without time between falls, in a continuous battle that could last over an hour. If any member pinned or submitted him, he lost everything. It was designed to be physically impossible. The week leading to this match was some of the best WWE television in years. Seth cut promos from a hospital bed, his body bandaged and broken, talking about how the Vision had represented his dream of dominance but had become his nightmare of manipulation. He spoke about how Brock had weaponized his ambition, turned his leadership into servitude, and used his passion against him. It was raw, emotional storytelling that transcended typical wrestling promos. Meanwhile, Brock and the Vision conducted a sinister countdown, with each remaining member cutting promos about exactly how they would destroy Seth. The psychological warfare was intense. They sent Seth footage of them training specifically to exploit his injuries. They had Paul Heyman calculate the exact amount of damage Seth's body had already sustained and projected that he would be physically incapable of surviving beyond the second opponent. The night of the gauntlet match, the arena was electric. This was appointment television. The energy felt like WrestleMania. Seth came to the ring alone, battered but unbroken, while the Vision stood united at the top of the ramp, a wall of dominance. Brock sat at a custom throne at ringside, the mastermind watching his plan unfold. The first opponent entered, and the battle began. 15 minutes of absolute war. Seth was working on pure adrenaline and heart. Every move he hit looked like it took years off his career. Every move he took should have ended the match. But somehow, impossibly, he hit his finisher and scored the first pinfall. 1 down. Before he could even catch his breath, the second opponent charged the ring. Fresh legs versus Seth's exhausted, damaged body. This opponent was ruthless, targeting Seth's injured ribs with precision strikes. 10 minutes of punishment that had the crowd wincing. Seth was trapped in submission holds that should have made him tap, but he refused. With what looked like his last burst of energy, he countered into a pinfall 2 down. The third member entered, and Seth could barely stand. This was the powerhouse of the group, someone who could end the match with a single move. The domination was hard to watch. Seth was ragdolled, thrown around like a child's toy. The crowd was begging him to somehow survive. At one point, he was hit with a devastating power move that should have been the finish, but his shoulder came up at 2.9. The will to continue was supernatural. Audience poll: at what point did you think Seth's chances were completely finished? Comment the exact moment. What happened next will be debated forever in wrestling circles. As Seth lay motionless in the ring, the fourth opponent preparing to enter, the lights went out again. When they came back, someone was in the ring. The crowd erupted because standing there, staring at the Vision members, was a WWE legend who had been feuding with Brock Lesnar for years. The implication was massive. Seth wasn't as alone as everyone thought. He'd made an alliance. Brock exploded from his throne, furious that someone had interfered with his plan. The legend and the Vision members brawled to the back, leaving Seth and the fourth opponent alone. Seth, given this small reprieve, fought with renewed purpose. The match was incredible. Back and forth action that had the crowd on their feet. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Seth connected with his finisher 3 down. One opponent remained the deadliest member of the Vision, Brock's personal enforcer. This was the final boss, the ultimate challenge. Fresh, brutal, and with clear instructions from Brock to end Seth's career if necessary. The beating Seth took was merciless. Suplex after suplex, power move after power move. Seth was broken, barely conscious. But then, in the most emotional moment, Seth's music hit, and former allies and friends from throughout his career came to ringside not to interfere, but to support. They stood at ringside, banging on the mat, leading the crowd in thunderous chants. Seth, running on pure spirit, began his comeback. The crowd was deafening. Trading finishing moves, both men were at their limits. Finally, Seth hit a desperation finisher combo stomp, followed immediately by a second stomp and collapsed on top for the pin. The referee counted 1, 2, 3. He did it. Against impossible odds, Seth Rollins had survived the gauntlet. The arena exploded. But then Brock Lesnar stood up from his throne, microphone in hand, and said the words that made everyone's heart stop: "You've earned the right to challenge me, Seth. But here's what you didn't know: the contract stated you had to win 3 matches, not 3 falls. You have to beat me to complete the challenge. Ring the bell." The referee, controlled by Brock's power, rang the bell. A fresh Brock Lesnar against a completely destroyed Seth Rollins. This was the ultimate betrayal, the final manipulation. Brock lifted Seth for an F5, but Seth, channeling everything he had left, countered into a small package. 1, 2, THR kick out. The crowd couldn't believe it was continuing. Brock, furious, went for another F5. Seth countered again, this time into a DDT. He crawled toward the ropes, pulling himself up. Brock charged. Seth moved. Brock hit the turnbuckle. Seth with a super kick. Brock stunned. Seth climbed the top rope frog splash. He hooked the leg. 1, 2, THRE no. Brock kicked out. What happened in the final moments will be analyzed forever. Both men, completely spent, struggled to their feet. They exchanged exhausted strikes. Finally, Seth went for his finisher, but Brock caught him, turned it into an F5 position, and the lights went out one more time. When they came back on, Paul Heyman was in the ring, having pushed the referee. Disqualification. Seth wins by DQ. Seth wins. The challenge is complete. Brock's face showed something nobody had ever seen: genuine shock and respect. Seth Rollins, against every odd, through every manipulation, had won. The Vision was his. Or was it? Paul Heyman grabbed the microphone and revealed the final twist. The contract specified that if Seth won, the Vision would be dissolved entirely. Neither man would control it. It was a scorched earth clause. Brock would rather destroy his creation than let Seth have it. The Vision members, realizing they were now leaderless, attacked both Brock and Seth. Complete chaos. The faction imploded. Every member fighting for themselves. The empire crumbled in minutes. In the aftermath, WWE was left with fascinating storytelling possibilities. Seth and Brock, both manipulator and manipulated, both empire builder and destroyer, now united against their former soldiers. The Vision is dead became not just the end of a faction, but the beginning of an even bigger story. Final question: where do you think this story goes next? Give us your bold predictions below and let's discuss in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because this story is just beginning, and Wrestling Newsletter will be covering every development. If you thought tonight's story was wild, trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. So don't stop now. Click on the video right here on your screen to continue the chaos, the drama, and the inside scoop only we deliver. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and join the Wrestling News CC family where the real stories of WWE come to life. See you in the next one.